Planning board to order. Everyone will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Minutes are not before us presently, so we'll defer those to a future date. Next item on the agenda is the possible extension or abandonment of applications pursuant to town code. State Route 94 LLC Solar Project, Lightstar Renewables. And I have correspondence here dated April 21st, 2025. Addressed to the town board and the planning board, of course, here. Dear planning board members, I write on behalf of the above referenced applicant in response to correspondence received from Sean Hoffman, PE, on April 18, 2025. The resolution conditions are still underway, and we understand that the conditional site plan approval is due on or about May 7, 2025. The applicant hereby requests an extension request for another 6-month extension. The applicant will cooperate with the town if another extension becomes necessary. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise. It can be reached by this phone number or by email. Signed, Olivia Feldman, Development Manager. Sean, do we have anything on this?
I don't personally, but Mr. Capello's here, and I believe that was his client. I don't know if he was aware of the extension request was submitted.
I was, and I was aware the letter was submitted, and I know they are working, this is the first extension request, and they are working to satisfy the conditions.
Okay, very good, thank you. Kelly,
November 6th, 2025.
comments from the board? Not have a motion to provide the 6-month extension as requested to November 6, 2025 for SR 94 LLC.
So moved.
Seamus, second by Phil. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? You got it, John.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, the Student Bus Company Incorporated, 20-2-6 and 20-2-7. Application for a site plan approval and lot line adjustment for a bus terminal on 3.4 plus or minus acres along Industrial Drive in the CO zone, AQ3 overlay. And we're here tonight to discuss the Part 3 EAF, expanded Part 3. Introduce yourself, please.
Good evening, I'm Anthony Tropiano from Hometown Engineering, representing the applicant. I have Matt here from Student Bus. I also have Gary from Prospect Construction, and our John Capello is our project director. We two meetings ago, on the 3rd of April, your board had considered Part 2. And then at the following submission deadline, which was on April 17th, we had provided an expanded Part 3, which I think is the main intent for tonight. I'd like to, if the board is okay with it, in many of our meetings we've had over the last few months, there's been just some lingering items that have been coming up, some questions, and I did amend the site plan, and I wanted to, if it was okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just go over, just point out some of those things that we've been able to verbally say, we haven't actually been able to show the board on a map.
These are the ones that were presented today, submitted to the town?
I'm sorry, say that again?
These are the changes that were submitted today to the town?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and they were just revisions specific to comments that we received from the board. Let me just grab my letter here. So this was something we did discuss at the last meeting. The first plan change that we made was we are showing the proposed well, so now you can actually see where that is located on the plan. The existing well is on the side of the building, and kind of like what we discussed at the last meeting, because of how this property will be qualified by the health department with the number of employees, they are required to operate a public water system, and this well just doesn't meet separations requirements, so this is where the new well is going to be located. And stop me if you have any questions in the middle of this. As part of that review with the health department for the well siting, we had originally had fuel storage tanks located in the back of the property. To move those away from the well, they're now going to be located here, just behind the building in this little alcove.
And that's where the fill station is as well as storage, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's where the buses will be fueled. Let's skip 3, because that's a little bit of a longer. Another thing that came up a few times was just like the clarity of the map, the readability of it, which it was complicated because we were attempting to show locations of the buses as well as on-site parking, so it's hard to see. So what we did is I now show to scale and in a lighter line type, the long buses and the short buses, and I think it's easier to read now. And then you can see the parking areas where those are located, which are the more bold, dark lines. And then another item that we had discussed in a previous meeting was where's the snow gonna go? So the property like generally slopes, this is high, slopes in this direction. So this is the low side of the property. So this is where they would basically push snow during snowstorm events.
There's no curbing between the gravel parking and the
No.
area before, okay.
No. So those were like kind of like the simple items, but things that just kept kind of being brought up. So the more significant one was just the general operation of the site. You know, so, and you know, it makes sense. I mean, that's like one of the biggest ticket items on this project is like, how are you going to get all these buses on the property? How are you going to have all these employees showing up and parking cars and getting in the buses and leaving? So I prepared a turning analysis, and I called it an arrival/departure sequence. So I do have copies that I can hand out. Mr. Chairman, come on up.
You can't, just make sure you give Grace one for the.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Is that what was submitted today?
This is what was dropped off today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then never mind, she already has a copy.
So basically the way this works is each sheet throughout the document shows the process sort of in order of employee arriving on site, parking their vehicle, and then exiting with their designated bus. The employee vehicles are in blue and the buses are in red. So if you just basically, if you flip through the document, you can see how that happens. And it's actually really nice digitally if you eventually get to look at the digital copy and you just hit next on the PDF, you can see it flow really nicely. It's easy to see. But this is just an example of how it could operate. I mean, I don't know exactly. Once they get on site and start operating, you know, they're going to have an operations manager that's going to figure this out exactly. They might do it exactly like this, but I just wanted to be able to show the board that it is possible. There is a way that it can be done, and it seemed pretty clean to me when I was working through it myself. I mean, if you get all the way to the end of the document, you want to know how everybody is going to come in and out at the end of the day, you just flip back in the other direction. And then throughout the document, there's a couple of spots where we show like a turning diagram.
Anthony, do the bus drivers have assigned buses? I mean, are they, they're not. So whoever comes in first grabs a bus in the sequence that you're releasing them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So we had a couple of turning diagrams. One I did towards the front, it's figure 2. And I just showed like if the property had, you know, full capacity, all the buses are parked on the property, that's about as tight as you can get it, they're able to actually move a long bus through the entire property pretty easily. And then later on in the document, there's a couple other areas where like, we're kind of like, you know, something that your engineer kind of identified in the previous letter, things that I also looked at, I thought were maybe the more difficult movements. So figure 14 shows a bus pulling out from the rear of the building. there's a couple more throughout here, you can flip through. So,
And again, one more question.
Sure.
The buses that are being serviced inside the commercial building, where are they entering the building?
So there's a bay door in the front, of the building.
To the left of where the
Yes, you
Four
see,
parking spaces, sir?
there's like a concrete,
apron in front?
the apron, yeah, that
Just to the
apron,
left of
there's a
that.
big bay there.
Okay.
So they're able to pull in, and they can.
Jockey around it.
Jockey one into the one side, and they can pull the other one to the straight. And I mean, there's probably a long map, but I mean, like, there's always gonna be a few spares.
Yes.
You know, you guys, they're always, you know, the buses get maintained, and not every single bus is used every single day. So that was kind of the object there. So that's what, I did submit that today to the town, but I just did that, just because these are like some of the lingering items, and not necessarily secret items, but things just kept coming up in different meetings, and it's hard to explain these things just verbally, you know, in a meeting.
I got a question.
Sure.
Slot 26, 25, 24, those are all the small buses? Is that correct? Just want to make sure I'm correct.
So 24 through 29 are short buses.
Those are all short buses?
Those are all short buses, yep.
And another concern that came up in our previous meetings was regarding the snow is, snow days where schools are closed, right? And you have buses here, and now you gotta push snow to the side, right? How are you gonna do that without putting the buses on the road?
Good question from Matt. I mean, I'll let Matt fill in, but my belief is that they're gonna clear what they can through the aisles, and then it's gonna be a matter of clearing off the buses in the top. You know, it's gonna be an operation sort of similar to this, like where, you know, these back buses are gonna have to get queued up around the site, and then they'll clear out that area and then put them back. But is that,
Yeah, I had a demonstration prepared for that, but I'm not a good artist, so it ended up being more convoluted than it was worth. But there's no employees coming in, so we'll, take a few over, put them in the vacant spots, load the shop up, that kind of thing. And we have, Bobcat, we have guys with shovels, all that kind of stuff. We'll move buses over a little bit, run a pass behind them, put them back in their spot, run another pass. That's how we do it in our existing yards.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, just one other thing. You're going
Please.
to have heavy snow, you're probably not going to have school, or you'll have a delayed opening, so kind of works in your favor in that regard.
Thanks, John. What else do you have for us, Anthony?
so that was just the planning board comments. I just wanted to get through that, and then, we definitely, I know we have some secret items that will be discussed. I was just gonna turn that back over to you and your engineer, and then we're ready to have conversations about any of those items.
Anthony, how does this actually work? In the morning, drivers are coming in, they're parking their cars somewhere, they're getting into their bus, moving the bus, are they then moving the cars into where the buses were?
No, the intention is, the intention is that the employees will arrive in a little bit of a staggered fashion. And there's parking available for them to pull in, park their car, get out, and they don't have to touch it. Then they're gonna walk to whatever the first bus is, in order, take that bus out and head off site. And it's hard because I just gave this to you, but if you do flip through this document, you can see
Why don't we have
how it's
Matt,
possible.
Matt's gonna run them through the page, just so
Yeah, yeah.
everybody's
Sure.
clear as to how it happens in the morning.
So, as an example, if you go to maybe the fourth or fifth page, you'll see there are 5 cars parked,
Blue vehicles.
the blue vehicles.
Figure 7.
Okay,
And by virtue of those, the drivers who brought those cars in having taken their buses out, you now have 5 or 6 empty spots in the rear of the building.
Okay.
And basically just cascades that way throughout the morning and then reciprocal as they're returning.
so once let's stay with figure 7. Once all of the blue parking stalls are filled up, where do the other cars that are coming in park?
Right, so if you you know, you go to the next one, you have one more car and one less bus in the
Okay.
rear. And then really so forth through the remainder. Each
Okay.
page is basically one more car on the site and one less bus on the site by
Okay.
virtue.
Thank you.
I don't mean to belabor this, because I think it's gonna work out, but there are employees that are not bus drivers, right? How many parking spots do those people
2 or 3 at most.
Okay.
We're ambitious on the bus counts and, you know, if we have to move one vehicle to another site to accommodate them, we will.
And there's a few spots that are
You do have
sort of
those
right in
parking
front of the
spaces
building.
in front of the building.
That we're just, I didn't even put in here, you know, those, my thought is that, you know, that'd probably be a mechanic and, you know, whoever's operating the radio.
Hopefully not me on that day. Hopefully not.
Where the fuel tanks were relocated, they're gonna be bollards or some sort of barriers to prevent an accident?
We can certainly do that, yep. And I don't know if it's on there yet. We discussed a pad, so we do intend to put a concrete pad under, not the tank itself, but where the nozzle would end up to fuel.
So, it looks like buses 35 and 36 are spares.
Let's see. Is that-
They're in the
Those are the ones
building.
inside the building.
Yeah, you're always, on any given day, we're gonna have vehicles being worked on. It's just preventative maintenance schedules and DOT inspections and all that, so that, you know, usually you need more in there than you can have, if that makes sense.
So I don't know the exact numbers, but if there's 40 buses shown, they're probably, you know, they're doing 36, 37, 38 routes or something like that. You know.
Have you had a situation where there's been spills of diesel or gasoline? And is there a protocol for cleanup?
We haven't in the past. We do have 4,000-gallon tanks at some other locations, and, you know, we always meet the requirements. We have kitty litter on site, that sort of thing, or spill cleanup kits. We can mount one right on the building right there, and certainly have, you know, some signage kind of address that.
You said that the fill area where the hose is in the concrete slab, so it's not being filled over gravel?
Correct. The tanks would obviously be double-walled, insulated,
Right.
all that, but it's for the fill site.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the big issue is the intersection.
And we are gonna get to that. Once we've gotten through this, then we're gonna move on to transportation.
Okay.
Traffic. Sean, we'll start with you first.
So this was last before you at your April 17th meeting. I circulated, although somewhat late, review of their EAF, which is the primary purpose that they're here this evening. But I think more importantly, at your last meeting, you had given me a homework assignment to bring John Canning. And John Canning is here, so. I
He gets the
understand
100.
That's probably a little bit more important than a couple issues I had pointed out. So
Okay.
if you don't mind, I think we'll be talking
By all
first.
means. John, if you'd like to weigh in on this application, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, John Canning with Kimley Horn. I received the package today that was prepared discussing the circulation, bus layout, and site distance and accidents. From the bus operation, it's tight. The key to it working is that the buses in the parking spaces are taken out first, because you've got, on either side, you've got half a dozen buses lined up. But you want to get the buses out of the parking spaces first, because the employees coming in are going to want the parking spaces. And I'd love to live in a perfect world where every driver came and every bus went, but I'm sure there'll be days where a couple of drivers come. I did note that without changing anything too much, you might be able to eke out another 5 parking spaces. So I'll pass that along to the applicant. It only makes things better to have more parking. There's no more paving associated with it.
Where are you thinking, John?
So on the top left corner, I'm not quite sure what the intent was. They had, I think it was 24 through 26, the buses there. The top end, those spaces, it's 78 feet across. on those spaces. You only need 60 feet for parking on both sides, which means the top end of that, you could put parking in there.
Is that how they have to rotate out in order to pull out?
Yes, so if you have, well, typically, if you have a 60-foot parking aisle with, let's make it simple, 20-foot car, 20-foot car, 20-foot drive aisle, then at the end of it, you'd have a 4-foot bump out, so that when I back out at the last space, I can back into it a little bit and drive out.
Right.
With 78 feet, I don't need that.
You don't need it.
Right? And I have this, it's 18 feet deep, which is deep enough for a car, so you can get 4 cars in there. What you'd really want to do is take the buses that are in there and just either put them up front, or like you have the other buses, or put them in the back. I'm sure you guys will work it out. You can have a look at it. If it's a crazy idea, you can just say, no, we've already linked to the board with this. But I
Right,
think
okay, so, yeah, so that was originally a smaller layout. But because we had the short buses in the back, I had to cut, with the turning outside, I had to kind of expand it. But your suggestion is, why don't we get those out of there?
yeah, take those buses out of there. You have a few spaces
And then
in the
you
back,
utilize the back
and a
more
few
versus
spaces in
split
the
parking.
bus, and then you, instead of having like 8 spaces in the back, you'll have 12.
Sure, okay.
All right.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
And the exit driveway, the entrance driveway kind of angles in that way, which is the way you're coming. The exit driveway, if you just, and I'll give it to you, if you just clip the corner of it, it'll make it easier to go out, especially if you have buses down the west
Just to
side.
change the flare.
Yeah, change the flare.
Yeah.
So that's the on-site stuff. And then, as I say, the buses that are parked in the parking spaces are the ones that have to be pulled out first. I will note, right, that you guys are showing, and I'm not saying it's not what you're gonna have, but you're showing 36 buses, of which 11 are small buses. So, you know, if all of a sudden you guys decide to use 36 large buses, that's a different animal. But, you know, that's what they're probably gonna do, and that's what they're putting forward. From the perspective of the driveway, I asked for the site distance, and I asked for the accident records, and I was hoping there'd be no accidents, right? And there were 21 accidents, half a dozen of which were deer, so by the way, I've never seen so many deer accidents in one
I think there were 10
location.
deer accidents.
Right?
not 21.
Yeah, so when you're driving by there at night, be very careful, right? But 10 of the accidents were left turn accidents, right? That's the very issue that we didn't want to see, right? The intersection currently needs the warrants for a left turn lane. This application is going to increase the number of left turns, obviously, and there've been 10 accidents in 5 years. A total of 21 accidents in 5 years. Typically, you would expect less than 5 accidents in 5 years for an intersection like this. So it's already high, and the predominant type is left turn accidents. The site distances, I don't know if I've given you my spiel on intersection site distance and stopping site distance before, right? You have to have the stopping site distance, because if you can't stop, you've got an accident. The intersection site distance is, we'd like to provide it. It makes for a smoother operation. And in looking at them, most of the intersection site distances are provided. The site distance to the right is short by 100 feet. It's 610, but the posted speed limit is 55 miles an hour. And there is a warning sign that says 40, but you know, good luck finding people who obey that warning sign on a regular basis. I'm not really that concerned about that, because all that means is that when somebody turns out, if somebody's doing 55, the person that's coming behind them is going to have to slow down when they catch up to them. However, the intersection site distance, when you're traveling northbound out of the village, and there's a bend you come around, and then you go down the hill a little bit towards Industrial Drive, the intersection site distance, by my reckoning, is only 490 feet. And I think the applicant's engineer indicated 500, so we're in the same ballpark. And the requirement is 530 feet. And now, the way I measured it, because I looked at Google Earth, there were 3 cars. One car was waiting to turn left, and there were 2 cars behind him, so that's like 70 feet, right? So I measured it from that point back around the curve. So that indicates that the site distance is not great, and we have an accident issue. So we have a site that's already developed with a building, right? So we'd like to see it put to some use. The applicant's letter has volunteered, correct me if I'm wrong, I read the letter, but has volunteered that they would put some money forward to help design and move this forward to get a left turn lane. I'll put this out there. I'm reluctant to do it, but I do think it's important. You guys have bus drivers, right? So they're your employees, and they're going all over the town, whatever. When they come back, if they came down 17A and made a right turn, they wouldn't be adding to the problem. So that's one way, and I know if you're in Florida and you want to get back to Industrial Drive, it seems ludicrous that you have to go some other way to come back. But that's one way you can say, we can make a difference in that regard and not put movements, especially buses, because they're bigger and slower. Drivers is a different thing. You know, you come from work and your boss tells me, you know, come the other way and you're late. It's like, I'm going that way. And there's not really a lot you can do about it. So that's the issue the board has, right? I'm here to tell you the facts as they are. It's an issue from a safety perspective. You have a site that's already developed and you're looking to reuse it. You have an applicant who has put forward a partial solution. It doesn't build a road, but it's, in their opinion, a fair share contribution. And I just made another suggestion. I don't know if the applicant wants to address that, but that would certainly address the bus issue. So if you have any questions in that regard.
So, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, if this road really warrants a left turn lane, or, like, what is the next step, even without them here, but
Yep.
since they are here?
Yep.
What's the next step in the time?
So if I was the supervisor, right, because typically it would fall to the supervisor, you're just the planning board, right? If I was the supervisor, I would take this information, the accident data, and I'd write to the DOT and I'd say, this DOT, this is your road. Our planning board identified that this is, in our opinion, a high accident location. We would like you, the department, to review that and make your determination as to what the case is, what needs to be done. We believe a left turn lane is needed. We started the process and we have one applicant who's made a donation, and then just kick it over to the DOT. It's their road, it's their responsibility. Ultimately, as a planning board, it's your responsibility, I presume, to make sure that whatever development goes on in the town, it does so in an orderly and safe fashion. So that's kind of where you have to make this tough decision.
John, quick question on your letter. The project, this is what you wrote, the project is conservatively projected to generate up to 77 additional trips on Industrial Drive in the peak hours.
Yes.
That's buses and cars and just related to the project.
So that assumes that all 36 buses, well, let me put it this way, all 36 drivers come in, right? Assumes all 36 buses are on the road, all 36 drivers come in, so that's 36. All 36 buses go out, that's 72. And then 5 employees come in as well in the peak hour, that's 77.
Okay.
And you know, maybe that'll happen, but there's about an average chance somebody's going to be late. One of the buses is up in the hoist, maybe it's closer to 7.
And the peak hours roughly would be?
Well, the peak hour is going to depend on what the school districts are. And also, the spread of the buses will depend on how many school districts, how many schools, and what their hours are. Generally speaking, you know, it's anywhere from 7:30 to 8:30. But you know, some schools start later, some schools start earlier, some schools are closer, some schools are farther. So, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know.
I agree with you entirely. We're ambitious on the hours that we're sharing. Our conservative is probably the right way to put it. We have vehicles who do BOCES, midday runs for the GED programs and the special ed, all that kind of stuff. We have drivers who go, you know, a couple for Florida that go to Westchester and come back at 10:30, 11 in the morning, so there's a handful like that. A couple of them take their vehicle home for the day. Those peak hours, you know, our traffic consultant advises us to be conservative and give worst case scenario, and that's what we try to do.
And how often do you have few vehicles coming in and out?
Daily. A lot of those are daily. We probably have 5 drivers for any number of reasons, maybe a couple more who lay over. They either take the vehicle home, which is a little more of an old school thing that we try not to do as much, but it does happen. And folks who, you know, take the kids down to the Bronx Zoo for the day, any number of things. And then those, you know, we have probably 4 or 5 regularly scheduled. If you see them at 11, 12 o'clock, the big buses on the road coming out of BOCES on Gibson Road over there, bringing them from their half-day programs.
If I may, tell me if I'm not wrong. What you're thinking about the left-hand turning lane,
being candid, obviously, it's not our favorite thing, and I'm not a traffic engineer, and won't present myself as one. I think Mr. Canning seems to be very reasonable, and our traffic engineer respects his opinion, and thought it was reasonable, and we're happy to contribute under that pretext. You know, a note on some of the accidents is, I did go through the crash data. Almost, I'd say 95% of they were all rear endings. They were all, I think the offending drivers were all under 27 years old, so make of that what you will. And, you know, we're big yellow buses, we're a little bit easier to see at a stop there, and there were no cross-traffic accidents. So I'm not saying that refutes anything, I'm not an expert, but I just wanted to note that.
When you're turning, would it be helpful, do you do this already perhaps? Are there lights on the buses to help one?
That's a great, in theory, but the state has a lot of regulations about when you can use your traffic control devices. Unfortunately, there is Durland Road over there. I don't know if that's Goshen or Florida. But, you know, you can go up, it's the road connecting Chester and Florida, that one. 94, thank you. And cut back down Durland. I drove it today, it was like 4 minutes out of the way, which isn't it's not a game changer.
So could we direct our bus drivers
Have them come in on the right.
avoid to address Mr. Canning's concern?
We certainly could, yeah.
So that would make them all then
Take right turns.
right in.
It'd be a left turn off of 94 at Sterling.
Left turn off 94.
It would
By
be a
Durham.
left turn off of 94 on the Durham.
Right, and the left turn off of Sterling, the left turn off of Sterling, that's 17A. I'm not sure it's 94.
Yes, I mean, so, it's a valid point. We know we have a known situation at this location, which is not as good as we had hoped, and we have an unknown situation. But we have asked for another another applicant to look at the accidents at that location. We don't have that yet.
And ultimately, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, we're, as most of you probably know, on a little bit of a time crunch, and, you know, we're amenable to what appeases the town and what makes sense for you guys to make that work.
Having said that. No,
He's like, oh.
a left turn lane on a state road is prohibitively expensive for any one development, and the time it would take would be the school year of 2030. And I was being totally, honest with you, what we believe the contribution would do, as Mr. Canning said, having a supervisor contact the DOT. If you were to contact the DOT and say, we have the design plans either ready to hand you, or we have the design plans funded, and I don't know if any other developments are coming in that will contribute traffic to that section, you may place yourself higher in the queue because the DOT knows, well, we at least have some contributions to get that done. But to be able to come here and say, guys, we can build that left turn lane for this development in an existing building, it's not gonna happen with this development or any development, any single development on that road.
And I'll add to that, it's warranted as it is today, unfortunately.
I've run into that with other projects with the DOT. It's like the straw that breaks the camel's back. You have the permit for them, and it's killed, several projects.
Sorry.
Go
I know
ahead.
you're split between how many are coming from each direction at the end of the day, or?
I think we projected, Mr.
You probably
Canning
projected
does-
50-50,
That's
which
what
is
I'm
like
thinking.
the easy way out, because if you do it one way, the consultant reviewer is gonna say it should have been the other way, so. But you would know better than I, the school districts and the schools that you serve.
Yeah, it's probably, without really crunching the numbers, 50-50 is probably about right.
I just have a question for John, kind of. Is there any kind of intermediate signage that could help out on 17A that we could recommend, even though I realize we can't mandate it, but
Yeah.
we could recommend to the DOT that, hey, maybe caution of, I don't know, bus turning, I don't know what they would say.
So the one sign that you could put up there that nobody wants
No left turn.
is no left turn, right? And you would do that if you believe that this left turn was so hazardous that you had to do it. right?
John, have you ever gone to the Dunkin' Donuts in Goshen? Where there's a sign across which says no left turn, and everybody does that?
Well, that's the other thing, right?
Then it's an enforcement issue.
It is, yeah, it is, it's always an enforcement issue. But it helps to the extent that it places more responsibility on the operator. If you get involved in an accident, making an illegal left turn, you know, you've
It's
got.
in the report.
Yeah, yeah.
And the timing for that?
For a left turn?
No, the timing for the signage.
Well, so the question was, is there any signage, right? And
Right.
the most obvious answer for that issue, whether people would believe it or not, or they follow it, is a no left turn sign. You could put up an intersection ahead warning sign. There may not be one there, I didn't check. Typically, you put those up to warn people of, people coming out, right? So that and you usually put it up where the intersection is not as visible as you would like it to be. The visibility here doesn't quite meet the standard, but it's better than some of the other roads around. But if you put that up, it would alert people that there is an intersection, and then they might look ahead and see, oh, yeah, there's a car stopped in the roadway, I better slow down.
Well, they put signs up like that for like driveways, blind driveways.
Yes, yeah.
Stuff like that, I don't know how they look.
There is a school bus, sorry to cut you off, there's a school bus, we have a stop right there too, so maybe a school bus stop sign.
How about, no left turn during certain hours?
So,
Like a peak hours?
yeah, you can do that, but it has been done in places, for sure.
Would the DOT have to?
The DOT would have to approve any signage on their road. And by the way, I think you could get a sign installed before the end of the start of the school year with DOT. Now, I'm not making any promises, but I think you could, if the board felt that this was the right answer and made a recommendation to the DOT. The thing about left turn accidents, the more traffic you have, it's a stupid way to put it, but the more traffic you have, the more accidents you have, right? But it's still a 24-hour-a-day thing. So if you put in a no left turn, let's say 7 to 9 in the morning, they usually like to do more than 1 hour, but I got away with 1 hour recently somewhere. But let's say you did 7 to 9, and maybe 4 to 6 in the evening. So you're cutting out the 4 busiest hours of the day. So you'll have a disproportionately large effect, but you're not doing it for the rest of the day, so it doesn't address the issue during those hours. Though you're less likely to have an accident, because if you're making a left turn, it's easier to make a left turn in the off-peak hours, which means you're stopped there for less, and there's fewer people coming behind you, which means you're less likely to get run into.
In the accident report, what time of day were most of those accidents?
I don't think it was listed in the materials that I was provided. You can
I mean, would that be the off hours or just random?
So you could, usually it will give you the time. And it would be very interesting if we could find that, and if they were that would be supporting data, right? You could go to the DOT and said, we had 10 rear-end accidents, and 8 of them occurred between 7 and 9 and 4 and 6. So I was like, yeah, sure, that's clearly a good reason to prohibit
Or
left
if those
turns.
accidents occurred when they're not gonna be operating.
Well, that would be good too.
That would be good too.
Yeah.
Is there any time that you're operating at those intersections where there are children on the bus?
Yes, we currently do, and there was, of course, a bus company at the end of the road for a number of years. I don't know how far back the data goes, but we do I always forget the name of the daycare at the end of Little Scholars or something like that, right on the corner.
First class daycare?
First Class Minds, that's the one. They're lovely people, but we have quite a few kids that go there at different times of the day. So we're in and out of there every day.
Small
currently.
buses, big buses?
Large buses.
Or a combination?
All large. They're all public school children.
A few years ago, we had flashing lights at Goshen Christian School at certain hours. I don't know how it got there, what the wording was or anything else, but it seemed to be around, again, like the rush hours or whatever. Is that a possibility? Does that seem to attract a little bit more attention than just a sign.
So I'm not familiar with the sign that you're talking about.
It's down now, I think.
It is in a ditch?
Yeah.
It's in a ditch, nobody.
And it's no longer functioning as a school that way.
So typically at a school, and there are certain requirements, but typically at a school, you can place a sign with a flashing light that says the speed limit is, and usually it's 10 miles an hour below the posted speed limit. So here, if it was 55, it would say speed limit 45, and either when lights are flashing, or there's usually a plaque below that says whatever the hours are, and most frequently it's like from 7 in the morning until 6 in the evening, sort of thing. If that's what you were talking about.
It's something along that line is what I'm talking about. And maybe we could pull that off with this first-class daycare.
Well, I'm not sure that it would, a daycare would qualify under the state's requirements.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's getting a lot of free advertising tonight.
No, I'm just thinking, hey, if it's public school buses taking them there, it may qualify as a public school function.
Well, talk about the DOT. I mean, they're eager to get this going, right?
Yep.
What is the timeline to get anything done? Like a sign, something small? I know getting a turn lane is.
So
crazy.
here's the way you, and Kelly will correct me because she's your attorney, right? Here's the way you could do it. You've made it, you've taken your hard luck, you've made a determination, use whatever language you want, to offset any impacts, the applicant has made the contribution, you're going to approach the DOT, and then you can make a recommendation that they approach the DOT for whatever measures it is, and if the DOT decides not to do it, the applicant has no power to go ahead and do it of their own volition, but you could make a determination that the other measures that they can do, such as directing the buses and the contribution to whatever can be done there, would be sufficient. So that's the way I view it, but Kelly, that's more a legal thing.
John, you know that, John Lee over at the.
Yeah, I know Lee, yeah.
I dealt with him last year, something totally unrelated, nothing to do with the board here. I was driving back from Port Jervis.
Yep.
And those big blue signs that list all the restaurants and the like.
Yeah.
Had the wrong exit number for Goshen to get off onto 17 and I'm heading towards Goshen.
Yeah.
They had 15B and it should have been 15A.
Yep.
And I had spoken to him, but actually face to face, and I said, you know, you gotta change it, it's just like a
Yes.
square, right?
Yeah.
Someone's gotta get through a ladder or a ladder vehicle. It took them almost a year and a half.
Yep.
A year and a half, they finally went by and they saw they switched it. So all the people that wanted to go to McDonald's or all the restaurants at that end of Middletown were first heading towards Goshen, would have to make U-turns and go back. That's how long it took just to change the letter B to an A on an existing
So
sign.
I have it, because we're in interesting stories. There was a interchange in California, and if you wanted to go on 690 North, there was nothing that told you that you had to stay in the left lane, and it was always a problem. So some graffiti artist went out there and he drew on the shield 280 North, right? Nobody noticed it, right? 5 years later, somebody discovered it and brought it to the attention of the DOT, and they said, oh, that shouldn't be there. So they took it down, and then they put the actual shield up, and the only difference really is they moved it over about a foot. So, but
Tactile is hard work.
yeah, to your point, if you know, how you word your approval document, you could require the applicant to
Make application.
make an application to the DOT to put the sign in, right? If we look at the accident data and it points to the fact that, yeah, it'd be a good idea to put the sign in at these hours. If all of the accidents are not from 7 to 9 and 4 to 6, then what's the point, right? But you could make a recommendation that they do that. The applicant then can go to DOT, and it won't take them a year to approve a sign, and then the applicant can put it in. I'm not saying it'll be done by September, but it'll be done by Christmas. Because you're not relying on the DOT to actually do it. You're just getting permission from them to do it. And that's typically how you work. If this was a bigger project and they were required to do other improvements, typically what you do is, okay, to mitigate your impact, you gotta put a traffic light in here. And so then the applicant goes and files a permit, and they go through and they do the work.
I
It's not
would
the DOT.
just ask if that were the solution, that we could work with the board to word the condition, because I don't wanna go into my horror stories with the DOT.
But you don't wanna wait a year and a half?
But, no, it's not waiting a year and a half. I think we will get a letter quickly from the DOT saying make the applicant put in a left turn lane because we have them and we don't wanna spend the money and we could care less if they, and I don't, being frank, we could care less if it kills the project, you know, we got somebody on the hook to build this thing, and so we don't have to build it. So if it was a condition that said, we are approving this and we ask the applicant to go for this mitigation, then maybe I can get the DOT to do it, because otherwise they will just say, hey, you want us put in the left turn lane and we'll have to be back here asking you to ignore it. I've had 3 projects in Newburgh where I've had to do exactly the same thing, where they just asked for some comments or some guidance from the DOT and there wasn't a permit, and the DOT said, yeah, put in a left, because there's left turn lanes needed on just about every state road at every intersection in the Hudson Valley, unfortunately.
But in the meantime, to not make an existing problem worse, could we do the right turn only?
Yeah, I think, I'll work with John, if this is the way it goes, I'll work with John on crafting some language, and this John too. Sean and I were just coming up with some ideas on, because the DOT will do that, you know, I mean, any state agency would happily take money from a private individual to pay for some of the work rather than, you know, use state dollars to do it, but they'll take a year to decide if they wanna do that anyway. So I think we could come up with a solution, but for the time being, have them circle around, make the right turn in, maybe get a sign, probably the fair share, but I'm not gonna come up with that language right now tonight on the spot, so I think we're gonna have to work through that, but I think I could do it if you want. You know, give me a couple minutes. On Saturday, I'll get it to you Saturday morning.
It's not like the Dicks are playing or anything.
John, I have one more question. Since this is an existing building,
Yep.
there obviously is a capacity for it to run a business out of there without our permission, without our additional permission.
Correct.
And generate traffic.
Correct.
Is the traffic that we're talking about generating for this project, we're all concerned about it.
Yep.
Is it a volume issue related to what could be there anyway? Or is it the type, is it because it's buses? that we're-
It's everything,
Okay.
right? It is a volume issue, it's a time of day issue. The bus operation is concentrated, but it's not over the entire day, right? If all of a sudden, you know, Trader Joe's, and that's not gonna happen, right? If all of a sudden Trader Joe's put in a store there, right, it'll be in and out all day long, right? And the application so far has not taken any credit for what might, as of right, in the existing building go in there.
Yeah.
You know, it's probably not gonna generate 77 trips in the peak hour, but it could generate 27 trips in the peak hour.
Well, actually, you made me think of something. So, in December and January, where it gets dark
Yes.
very early, do the number of accidents increase during that period?
It's all, a lot of it is location specific. And I don't know for this particular location.
Mhm.
It seems kind of random too, because like in 2024, there were only 2 accidents, one of which was a deer head.
Yeah.
The whole year.
Accidents are
So
extremely random, which is why you can't project how many accidents are gonna, you really can't project how many accidents there will be.
That's why they're called accidents.
Well, we're supposed to call them crashes now. Right.
Does the
They'll
speed of
increase
the
it
bus
with
have
the
any
trips.
impact, increase of accidents because they're turning slower than the car would?
Well, potentially, yes, but to the point, oh, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
Matt, yes, sir.
Matt?
Matt.
Yeah, to Matt's point, it turns slower, but it's a big yellow bus, and I think they have the orange lights on if they have people on them, right?
Only if they're about to stop.
Only if they're about to stop, okay. So that'll be a no.
We do have
for this.
marker lights always on, not flashing.
Okay,
But they're big and yellow.
yeah.
Mhm.
And now we have a rumor that there's gonna be a Trader Joe's.
I'm an industrial life.
Oh my God.
We'll put the overpass in for that.
Oh, gosh.
Other comments? Go ahead.
So it is a continued public hearing.
It's not a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. They closed it, never mind. So
Yes.
this was the EAF Part 3.
Yes.
Did anybody else have? Well, I mean, we were all talking, Trader Joe's, why not open it up? It's the Part 3, so what the board can do this evening is you can authorize the drafting of a neg deck. You can also authorize the drafting of a resolution. Obviously, you don't need to take action on the resolution because you'll be getting it the same night, but you would have it before you to discuss with last night.
Sean, you have concurrence?
Yeah, I had one, what I think is a relatively small issue on the Part 3, separate from traffic. You got traffic comments from John, and that was with regard to the wetlands. Definitely indicated the wetlands 1,000 feet away, but there was a figure in there that made the wetland look much closer. Yeah, so I had suggested that you consider having them have the wetland delineated to make sure it is the 1,000 feet. I presume that the figure was off somehow. So, that was all. Just make sure, just do a delineation on that side of their project to make sure that the wetland is not encroaching on there, which I don't think it is.
And the only thing I would like to add is, if that's part of the, if we do move forward with a conditional, is maybe to, with the caveat that it be looked at by a professional to determine if the wetland exists, and then if it does exist, it be delineated.
Okay, yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Yeah.
that makes sense. But, and then the other caveat, that if it does exist on the site and it's within a developable area, they're gonna have to come back to you.
Right. Frank, did you have anything on this application?
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
Are you guys gonna look at modifying the site plan like John drew out on his yellow plan
With the extra parking.
in the back?
It's really only paint, there was no physical, no pavement.
Yeah, so the suggestion was to move the short buses out towards the front.
You don't need to decide tonight, think about it, I'm just thinking that if they do make these motions, how I'm gonna work this, so.
Whatever's the
John
least
will get back to
frictional.
me.
I'll send you over what I have, you guys can look at it,
What's the vision date on the plan?
tell the town whether you think it's a good idea or not. If it's a good idea, you can incorporate it. If you think it's not a good idea, then you have a plan that's.
Yeah, so we'll incorporate it as part of the conditions, what you're saying, yeah, that's all.
Other comments or concerns from the board? If not, could I have the board,
Authorize the draft, I'm sure you don't want another public hearing.
the next deck,
Authorize the neg deck.
the next deck?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have by Marty, second by? Seamus,
Eric,
I'm giving this one to Eric, I heard his voice first.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Can I have a motion then to authorize council to prepare a conditional resolution of approval for this application?
I'll place the motion.
Diana, second by? Seamus, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against?
So I'll have both of those drafts for you at your next meeting for consideration. And I'll send them to John and Anthony, like usual beforehand.
Thank you very
much.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Appreciate it, thanks so much.
Thank you, board. See you all.
John, have a good night. Safe trip home.
Thank you.
John, west side intersection.
Yeah, I'm going the other way.
Yeah, I'd like to put you through a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Sean.
Yeah, so, student bus will obviously be on your next meeting agenda. I don't know if the board recalls, but Ken and Hill, 17M Flex, you had, I think, adjourned the public hearing until the 15th, so that will be back. We're waiting for a response from the DOT. So I will email the applicant tomorrow, see if there's a response. If there is not a response, it's up to you what you want to do with it.
That's for,
Yeah, 17 Flex.
yeah, that was the public hearing?
You had a public hearing, but you adjourned it because you
Is
wanted
that
to
going to
see.
continue on the next meeting?
Correct. yeah.
Okay.
If you recall, you adjourned it for like a
Yeah.
month. They thought they'd have a response from DOT. They did not, so you kicked it out a little further.
Yep.
And then you received a submission today from the Hartley Road Battery Energy Storage System. I had emailed them to say that there's no action this board can take, but they wanted to come back to you and further discuss the site plan.
So there's 3 items.
But is that gonna be the battery person?
I don't know. They just want to discuss revised plans.
As long as there's something substantive to talk about.
Yeah.
questions from the board? Not, can I have a motion then to close the meeting?
Just comment?
Neil?
No, I've gone to the fire training center the other day.
Yes.
And they actually are going to be presenting a training session really targeted to fire department, fire personnel on battery emergencies and electrical storage systems next Tuesday night.
What time, Neil?
Can you pass that on to Grace so she can distribute it to the board as far as
Sure,
the
you can
time?
copy that. Yeah.
That was easy enough.
Okay, and I don't know, I know they told me I could go to it, it's gonna be really aimed towards firemen, but I.
But it's open to the public?
I think if they get in touch with them and do that, I certainly spoke to them and they said, come on in.
Okay,
So if you plan on going, I would certainly contact them first.
sure. Anything else?
No,
Okay, Frank, anything?
thank you.
Okay, in that case,
You had us there.
motion to close the meeting. Eric, second by?
I'll second.
Marty, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against?